support components of Native American history in Washington State. And what I really liked about that bill is it invited our local tribes to be part of that curriculum development. So rather than something that came from Olympia, we have a number of tribes spread around our state. They were part of helping to develop that curriculum with local schools and with local school boards. That's a pretty good example of how to do it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Next, we will go to Austin Jenkins from Northwest News Network.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to ask about some of the voting related bills that are getting hearings. I think the context is you're getting a lot of bill specific questions because it's still early in the session and a lot of hearings are going on. Maybe we'll get more philosophical later on in the session, but there's specifically a proposal in the Senate to expand the State Voting Rights Act. And there's also a proposal to expand, but also it looks like strengthen the state's motor voter system and to try to, at the same time as expand it, also perhaps make it more secure. And I'm just wondering if anybody on the panel has had a chance to look at these, has any opinions about the direction that the majority party seems to be headed on these two fronts.
Well, I will jump in there a little bit. I am not deeply familiar with the expansion of the Voting Rights Act that's proposed. I know it exists, and I have some concerns. I mean, let's be clear. We've just recently enacted the Washington State Voting Rights Act. It is not fully implemented. It seems a little bit early to me to come back in, and as I understand that shrinks the windows for the review of a complaint. It basically just tightens everything up before we've ever even seen if the underlying bill works. So without knowing the bill a lot, I can't talk a lot about the specifics, but if all it is tightening up the current law without ever allowing the current law to get into place and see what it does, it seems premature to me.
Great answer, John.
Austin, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just briefly, let me ask you about, so regarding the automatic voter registration, this is it's a different bill, also in the Senate. It would expand motor voter, essentially, it looks like, to other arenas like the health benefit exchange when you buy health insurance. But at the same time, it sounds like it would require Department of Licensing to develop a system to determine whether each applicant presents sufficient information to complete a voter registration. So it's an opt-out rather than an opt-in model. But kind of concurrent with this, it sounds like efforts would be made to make the system perhaps more secure. How does that one land with you all?
Well, again, I'm not deeply familiar with the bill. It is early in the session, but I think, I mean, not surprisingly, efforts to get folks registered to vote broadly, I support those. But we need to do it in a way that we ensure, folks are authorized to vote. And this, what you described seems like, we might be getting ahead of ourselves here. We should do this in a careful, cautious way. And I say that because we have, unfortunately, folks on both sides of the aisle, locally and nationally, in different circumstances, calling into question our election system. I believe in our election system. I don't agree with every law that's on the books regarding to our election system, but I do think our election system is run in accordance with past law, and we shouldn't undermine the credibility by calling into question. I just think adding more things like this without very carefully thinking through it, adds questions on both sides of the aisle. That's good for no one. That doesn't help us in Washington State or nationally.
Okay, thanks, Austin. And then we will go to Joe O'Sullivan with the Seattle Times. Joe, are you with us? Oh, there you go.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
We can.
All right, question for the leaders. Please ignore the phone in the back. Senate Bill 5909, Senator Emily Randall's emergency power bill. I'm curious to hear from the leaders what your thoughts on on that and how it would let you exercise your powers, and if that's sufficient to address your concerns on emergency powers.
Well, I guess since it's a Senate bill, I'll jump in on that one too. So kind of two things. One, after nearly 2 years, it is nice to have to see the Democrats entering the discussion on emergency powers, acknowledging that we've learned some things over the last 2 years, that this emergency is not like previous emergencies that were envisioned under, when the current statute was created, and we need to adjust. So that's in my view, good news. The bad news is the actual bill itself does very little to change our current circumstance and does very little to re-engage the legislature in weighing in on the proclamations that the governor has issued over the course of the pandemic. So good and bad. I'm glad they're finally entering the conversation after 2 years of deferring to the governor. Not super impressed with the proposal, but happy to have a good faith discussion about where we could get to make our law better with regard to emergency powers.
Yeah, I believe the last week we've seen 2 deep blue states make some major changes. In New York, the mask mandate was found to be unconstitutional. And in Connecticut, I believe that they're ending the state of emergency or major elements of it. And that's a voluntary action of, I think, the state legislature in deep blue Connecticut. So Washington is far, far behind even other blue states. I'm glad to see Democrats taking action on this. There's a few detailed areas that I'd like to make more progress, and we've shared some ideas about this. First of all, I think to require unanimous consent to end the state of emergency, that Democrats generally like things that are simple majority rather than super majorities, and it seems like we ought to be able to do it with 3 out of 4 in this case. And as we've discussed this, it's become apparent there's some reasons where for federal funding issues, for example, you might want to maintain a state of emergency, but you would want to have some legislative control of the individual mandates. And so we'd like to see something with more flexibility there. And we've got, about 10 days now to work on improving these bills. And I'm certainly not giving up hope that we can make major progress.
Joe, did you have a follow-up question?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, great. I think that's all our questions. I will turn it back over to Senator Brown.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure talking to you. Just a reminder, if you didn't already, the Senate's going to be on the floor Wednesday and Friday. On Friday, I mentioned that we will be doing a resolution honoring former Senator Doug Erickson and his family. They'll be down here. So I look forward to that. And beyond that, we'll continue to focus on reducing the cost of living here in Washington, improving public safety, and as I said, rebuilding trust in state and local government. Thank you.